Heading into this season, everybody was trying to figure out who could potentially unseat the New England Patriots in the AFC East. And you looked at the teams and their situations, and a lot of people, myself included, thought that maybe the Miami Dolphins would be that team. Now, of course, there were people that were ridiculous and thought the Buffalo Bills would be that team, but they had their own comeuppance as well, just like I did, along with others. The thought process being is that the Patriots had lost some key players on the defensive side of the ball, most notably Darrell Revis and Vince Wilfork. You're looking at a team that was also staring down the barrel of Tom Brady being suspended for the first 4 games of the year. And how was that going to play out? And what was going to happen? Could one of these other AFC East teams get off to a hot start and win some games early? And as a result, be able to create some space between them and the New England Patriots that the Patriots couldn't overcome. And I thought that maybe the Miami Dolphins could be that team ultimately, because I thought heading into this season, joke's on me, that out of the bunch of the other teams in the AFC East with Tannehill, the Dolphins had the best quarterback. Lo and behold, once you know, as the season played out, you found out they actually had the worst quarterback in the division, because Tyrod Taylor, I thought, was pretty solid for the Bills this year. He was better than Tannehill, and Ryan Fitzpatrick was most certainly better for the New York Jets than Ryan Tannehill was for the Miami Dolphins. Now, I'm not just trying to put that on Ryan Tannehill, because there were a lot of other flaws here, but this team was a massive disappointment to me in 2015. They got off to that horrendous start. They fired Joe Philbin after that piss-poor performance against the Jets in London. They ended up promoting Dan Campbell from within to be the interim guy. He proved himself to not be the answer. This team ended up finishing 5-11 and last in the AFC East, and ending up with the number 8 overall pick in the 2016 NFL Draft. For a team that a lot of people thought had a chance at the playoffs, and some people like me foolishly thought had a chance to win that division for God knows what fucking reason, lesson learned, they were an utter disappointment no matter what. Now, they had some things go well, I guess you could say, more so in terms of individual performances. I thought Jarvis Landry had a really good second year. I mean, you're talking about a guy that showed himself to be a pretty reliable option out of the slot, a really good hands guy, a really good route runner. Not surprising based off of what you saw on him at film at LSU. To me, Odell Beckham Jr. was the truth, but Jarvis Landry was going to be a really good wide receiver for a number of years, and he showed that this year. Rashad Jones, the Dolphins safety, he was, to me, their best defensive player throughout the course of the year. It was great to see him getting Pro Bowl and All-Pro consideration, because he had a really, really good year on a defense that was pretty bad. Rashad Jones, to me, was that one shining beacon of hope and that one shining star consistently throughout the course of the entire season, and to me, by far, their best player. No offense to Cameron Wake, who got injured early in the year, or Olivier Vernon, who I thought had a solid season. Rashad Jones, to me, was their best defensive player. Lamar Miller, when he was given opportunities, I thought did really well for himself. About 1,200 all-purpose yards. This was a guy that made some big plays. I was disappointed that this Dolphins team didn't find a way to get the ball in his hands more. It's like you could see clear as day that Lamar Miller is a playmaker at the running back position. This is a guy that can do some things. I don't know if they're concerned about his durability, his ability to hold up. I don't know what the hell it is, but for some reason this Dolphins organization in the past couple of years has been bound and determined to not make Lamar Miller a true lead back, and I don't fucking get it. He's clearly the best you have. And at times he showed you just how explosive he can be and what big plays he can bring to the table. And even in the midst of the ridiculousness of their offensive scheme and their lack of commitment to the running the ball, Lamar Miller still had a solid season. What else went well for this team, though? Joe Philbin getting fired. It was time to move on, and, once they put up that piss-poor performance in London, there was no reason to wait anymore. This is a team that still at week 17, they're a bad team. They found a way to beat New England, and they found a way to prevent New England from getting home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Hey, that's something as an organization that you could build on in the future. Yes, sure, that win, cost you a few spots in terms of your draft position, but that's not a bad loss. That lets the New England Patriots know that you're still a team that has to be taken seriously, and it lets people know within that organization, within that locker room, that you can potentially contend with those guys. And you still ended up with a top 10 pick. And for the Dolphins, based off of their needs and where they could be looking in this draft, they should be able, with that 8th overall pick, if they stayed put there, to be able to get a really good player on either side of the ball that could help them right away. But, again, this was a bad year, and a lot of things didn't go well. Ryan Tannehill regressed. For some reason, this offense fell way too much in love with the passing game when Tannehill was already struggling as it was. That inconsistent use of the running game was very, very frustrating. And if you look at Lamar Miller's numbers, you see a guy that's averaging close to 4.5 yards a game or a carry on the ground. Why the hell does he not have a 1,000-yard season? At least a 1,000-yard season. It finished with like 840 or 830. I think it was something like that. What the hell are you doing? Especially when your defense is struggling and not that good. And this was a defense that was 30th against the rush and 24th against the pass. And you were expecting major things out of this defense with the signing of Ndamukong Suh. He was supposed to be that franchise defensive player. He was supposed to be that difference maker. But instead of building the defense around what Ndamukong Suh does, the Dolphins wanted to sit there and try and just plug Ndamukong Suh into wherever they could and make him figure it out. It was just a bad deal on all parts, and Suh played better as the year progressed, but he wasn't Ndamukong Suh like you needed Ndamukong Suh to be when you paid him that level of Ndamukong Suh money. So, you invest that much into one guy and he doesn't produce, it's not a good sign for your defense. But then you go back to the offensive side of the ball. This is a team that averaged less than 20 points per game. They threw the ball way too much, which was in particular to me astoundingly, ridiculously idiotic, considering that they still struggled to protect Ryan Tannehill in the passing game. I mean, why would you put Ryan Tannehill under so much pressure when you actually have a guy in Lamar Miller that can run the football and can make some big plays happen? You're a team that can run the ball a little bit. Why would you put so much pressure on your young quarterback, especially knowing that he's still under siege a lot from his crappy offensive line? I just don't get it. And this is a team, again, when you're talking about 5-11, there has to be some bad losses in there. They lost to San Diego, who has the number 3 overall pick in this draft. They lost to Dallas, who has the number 4 overall pick in this draft. They lost to Jacksonville, who has the number 5 overall pick in this draft. So 3 losses to teams that have higher draft picks than them. When the Dolphins are picking in the top 10, they're picking 8th overall. Just imagine if you beat 2 or 3 of those teams, you're sitting 7-9 or 8-8, and it was a bad year, but it wasn't the unmitigated disaster that this year ended up being. Now, again, it wasn't a surprise that the Dolphins were going to try and make a splash right away once the season was over. They needed to find their new head coach, and they needed to strike quickly and make sure they got their guy. And very early on, it was clear, I think, to everyone once the reports started coming out of who they were looking at, who they were interviewing, that Adam Gase, the Chicago Bears offensive coordinator, was going to be that guy. Because they look at Adam Gase and his ability to work with Peyton Manning, and this past year, his ability to work with Jay Cutler and get Jay Cutler to at least cut down on some of the mistakes and protect Jay Cutler and some of the things that they did. You look at it, Adam Gase, 37 years of age. You look at some of the quality that he has on his resume and the fact that a lot of people think that he has what it takes to be a really good head coach at the NFL level. With coordinators, you never know until they're given the opportunity, frankly. Dave Wanstead and Dave McGinnis used to be really hot coordinator names, too, for NFL head coaching jobs, as did Norv Turner, and you see the results of those over the years. You know what I mean? You just don't know. But you look at a guy like Adam Gase, and there's a lot pointing to the fact that this guy is the right hire, that this guy is the one. Because you're talking about a Joe Philbin, who in 2014, reports have come out now, was so sold on Ryan Tannehill that he wanted to draft Derek Carr in round 1 and build his team around Derek Carr. So it's no surprise to see that Ryan Tannehill in some ways maybe struggled in that system because his coach was never really bought into him to begin with. How is a quarterback expected to be able to succeed in that type of environment if he knows from the get-go, from the jump, that somebody's not going to be out behind him? You got to think about that stuff. Adam Gase, you would think, at least for the moment, is the right guy to come in. If anybody's going to be able to fix some of Tannehill's deficiencies and protect Tannehill and do a better job of bringing some balance to the offense, similar to what the Bears did in 2015 out of necessity as much as anything else, it was Adam Gase. It will be yet to be determined whether this will be a really good hire or not, but on the surface, it looks like it was a good decision. I applaud the Dolphins for making what, to me, looks like the best hire for them. But now you've got the head coach in place. I can't believe they're going to have Tannenbaum overseeing the personnel. Oh, good luck to you. Ask the Jets fans and organization how that worked out. But now you point to the NFL draft. And what are some of the biggest needs there for the Miami Dolphins? For a team that brought in Ndamukong Suh, he was the type of guy that was supposed to mask other deficiencies on that defense. But instead, he didn't. And those deficiencies, frankly, at all 3 levels of the defense were grossly exposed throughout the course of the 2015 season, as was borne out by the results by this defense against the run and the pass. I mean, they just weren't good. But to me, you look at their biggest areas of need, you got to start with the linebacking core. This is my opinion. This is their biggest area of weakness. They lack talent there. They lack explosiveness there. They lack athleticism there. They need somebody in the middle of that defense playing behind Ndamukong Suh. That could be the defensive play caller. That could be that sideline to sideline 3-down type of guy. They need somebody at the outside linebacker position, that weak side linebacker, that could be that jack of all trades, that could sit there and be solid against the run, that could sometimes provide you something as a blitzer, a guy that could cover running backs out of the flat, that could cover some tight ends and some slot wide receivers at times, helping you stay in your base defense more, or at least being able to run the nickel as opposed to always having to go with 6 or 7 defensive backs. They really need help in that linebacking core. When they have addressed it in the past, namely somebody like a Deion Jordan that they traded up a lot to get, in 2013. That was an unmitigated disaster. They've got to move on from them. You know, I wouldn't be surprised to see this team invest multiple draft picks into the linebacking core, and they need to. And when you look at where they're sitting at number 8, in theory, Jalen Smith would have been perfect for them. But when you look at the fact that he maybe had a significant knee injury, and there were reports of talking about he may have torn either his ACL or his MCL. I've seen some reports that talk about he's torn both. I don't know which it is. You know, there's a very good chance that Jalen Smith doesn't play at all in 2016. Would the Miami Dolphins be willing to risk the 8th overall pick on a guy who just had a significant knee injury in his bowl game and who might not play at all his entire rookie year? I don't know. But I wouldn't blast him too badly if they did. Now, obviously, they probably would be happier if a Miles Jack fell to them at number 8 in this draft because you figure out where to play this fucking athlete. You could play him at linebacker, inside. You could play him outside of linebacker. You could use him in a hybrid role. You could even play him safety in some situations. It would be an ideal world, but I don't know that he'll be there. So the Dolphins are kind of in a situation where linebackers are biggest need, but they might not have the right guy there available for him at number 8 because one guy is going to be already probably drafted and the other guy might not be worth a top 10 pick because you have questions significantly about his knee injury that he just suffered. But it's a shame because to me, Jalen Smith, number 8, or Miles Jack, number 8, whichever one of those two guys was there, it's a perfect fit. I think it's a little rich in the blood for a guy like a Darren Lee or a Reggie Ragland, in my opinion. I think that's just way too high to take either one of those guys in this draft. So in this first round, they may be looking at depth at the corner position. You know, Brett Grimes has regressed the past year or two, and his wife's a psycho cunt. So you're probably, with his cap figure, looking to move on from him because you want to get that distraction as far away from your fucking organization as possible. Way to go, bitch. You cost your family some money and you cost your man a job, probably. You're stupid, and I hope he cunt punch you and divorces your dumbass. But you also look at defensive end. You know, when you look at cornerback, defensive end, those are two areas where with the 8th overall pick, there could be guys available that make a lot of sense for the Miami Dolphins. You could sit there at defensive end and you look at guys like Shaq Lawson or Emmanuel Ogba or maybe a DeForest Buckner if he's there, even though I'm not sure he would be. You know, one of those 3 defensive ends makes a lot of sense. Cameron Wake coming off of a serious injury on the wrong side of 30. You know, you needed some edge rushing depth. One of those guys could help you out. Or you look at the cornerback position. Maybe a guy like Vernon Hargreaves makes some sense. Maybe they get really hot on a guy like Mackenzie Alexander out of Clemson. You know, those guys could make sense. I think this could be a little rich in the blood for either one of those two corners sitting here at pick 8. I think defensive line would be the better pick, but you know, it is what it is. At some point in time, though, they're going to have to address the offensive side of the ball too, most notably the offensive line. They have to. Because that offensive line, they invested big money in Brandon Albert. They've invested first-round picks in the past in guys like Pouncey, who can't seem to stay healthy, and Juwan James, but their offensive line still isn't good. They need talent there on the outside and on the interior. You look at this Miami Dolphins team, and it's one of these teams where I'm starting to look at them, and I'm like, what's their identity? Who are they supposed to be? What's supposed to be good about them? Who are their stars? Who are their big-name players? You know, Tannehill gets the attention because he's the quarterback that got paid. Suh gets the attention because he's the defensive tackle that got paid. But who are they? And as much as anything else, hopefully the hiring of Adam Gase for this Dolphins organization helps them to establish and cultivate an identity, and they need to build upon that identity by hitting on some key areas that I've already outlined here in the 2016 NFL Draft.